When we last left our friends the Sabres, they were in a bit of a transition. Danny Briere and Chris Drury had both left for big money in big markets. 2008 saw the Sabres finish 10th in the East, a far cry from their President's Trophy winning 2007. Derek Roy, Jason Pominville, and Thomas Vanek stepped up, but it wasn't enough. Shockingly, it was the rock-solid Ryan Miller who really struggled, posting his worst season since becoming a starter. It looks bad for Miller in a vacuum, but the goalie started 74 games and came off the bench in relief twice. He was ground to a pulp by season's end. From leap day on, Miller had an .877 save percentage and went 7-7-3. Backup Jocelyn Thibault took one start during that stretch, but I assume he was really cheering Miller on in the rest of the games. The down year and reality of the salary cap cost them star defenseman Brian Campbell, a level of player you can't really replace. But the Sabres did trade for Craig Rivet in the offseason to take at least Campbell's slot on the blue line. Rivet was also named the new captain of the Sabres, replacing the five-captain system Lindy Ruff had in place for 2008. The Sabres crept forward in 2009, finishing in heartbreaking 9th as opposed to 10th. But Ryan Miller returned to form, now with a lighter workload thanks to Michael Telkvist and Patrick Lalime. The casualty of 2009 was Max Afinogenov, who evaporated, got placed in Lindy Ruff jail, then left in free agency.
Back with Afinogenov then over the line. He goes to the net, took a shot, scored!
In 2010, Ryan Miller went nuclear, the best goalie in the world, starting with his .936 save percentage October. He was spectacular for the United States in the Olympics, posting a .946 save percentage and going undefeated until the gold medal game. With superstar play from Miller, the Sabres made the playoffs easily, winning their division and securing home ice in a matchup against the Bruins. This was a sub-Real 500 Bruins team, so the Sabres were a clear favorite, and they won Game 1 the same way they won throughout the season. A quick goal from Thomas Vanek, and Ryan Miller slamming the door.
Krejci going to the net, but Miller is there to make the save, and he got shoved into the net.
It all came unglued when in Game 2, Johnny Boychuk chopped Vanek on the knee and knocked him out for the game, which the Bruins narrowly won. The Bees won Games 3 and 4 with Vanek on the sideline, and though the Sabres won Game 5 without him, Vanek returned for his squad to be eliminated in Game 6. It was a hard-fought series, and these teams, as divisional rivals, didn't have much love lost for each other going forward. Hey, 2011, the Sabres are back again. Still a strong team. Miller isn't the best goalie in the world, but he's still very good and crucial to this team's success. The Sabres even survived losing Derek Roy to a torn quad and march into the playoffs, this time without home ice. The Sabres battled the high-powered Flyers offense in round 1. The series alternated between the way the Sabres wanted to play and the way the Flyers wanted to play. 1-0 Sabres in Game 1, 5-4 Flyers in Game 2, 4-2 Flyers in Game 3, 1-0 Sabres again in Game 4. The Sabres offense made a statement in Game 5 with 3 first-period goals, and though the Flyers battled back to force overtime, Tyler Ennis put Philly on the ropes with an OT winner.
Shooting one tonight by Leighton. They score on the rebound.
Game 6 had a similar Sabres surge and Flyers comeback. With the overtime winner is a man who was nearly the focus of this video. This time it was Derek Roy returning to watch his team be eliminated as the Flyers handily took Game 7. Okay, the Sabres thought. Let's try this one more time. But the twist is, now we have Ville Leino. How about that? The Sabres roared out of the gate in 11-12. They won their home opener against the Ducks thanks to a game winner by new friend Leino. But that was just one game of their terrific 10-5 start to the season. The crazy part was Miller hadn't even been that good. He went 5-5 with a .913 save percentage, a touch above league average. But rookie Jonas Enroth had been tremendous. 5 starts, 5 wins, and just 8 goals against. Maybe Miller, who was now 31, could start 55 to 60 games as opposed to 65 to 70. It was Miller who got the start against the defending Cup champion Boston Bruins, who were having a bit of a slow start to the year at 7-7. Vanek scored his 11th of the season to open up the scoring. Then
the puck gets out beyond Miller, way out, and Lucic barrels into Miller, and here we go.
Okay, so who was on the ice for the Sabres, and would any of them be able to stand up to Lucic at 6'3", 240 pounds? Thomas Vanek. One career fight, according to hockeyfights.com. Vanek is bigger than you'd think at 6'2" and over 200 pounds, but he is no fighter. He fought Brendan Witt against his will, trying to stand up for Jochen Hecht by pushing Witt, and got beaten up.
That's Brendan Witt, it looks like, with lefts coming, bombs, everybody tangled up.
Vanek is enough. Andrei Sekera, 2 career fights. Sekera is not very big and is probably even less of a combatant than Vanek. His career high in penalty minutes was just 34, and his fights came against the even smaller Vladimir Sobotka and Jared Boll, who jumped him in a preseason game. Sekera is a no. Jason Pominville, 1 career fight. The Sabres' newly named captain is the smallest man on the ice for Buffalo at 5'11", 180. And like Vanek before him, his only fight was involuntary after being grabbed by Matt Cook. He didn't even throw a punch and has been a perennial Lady Byng candidate since entering the league. Pominville is a no. Tyler Myers, 0 career fights. Myers is gigantic at 6'8" and had fought plenty in juniors. At this point, the 21-year-old former Calder winner was yet to fight in the NHL. He would fight occasionally throughout the rest of his career, but would he want to start his amateur boxing career against Lucic? Myers is a maybe. Finally, Paul Gaustad, 36 career fights. Gaustad is the obvious guy to answer the bell here. He's taller than Lucic and only a bit lighter, and has plenty of experience not just fighting, but fighting genuine heavyweights. Adam McQuaid, Kevin Westgarth, Mike Rupp, these are big guys that Gaustad went up against and lost every time. But at least he showed up. Gaustad is a yes. But when Lucic ran Miller over, who were the 3 Sabres closest to him? Vanek, Sekera, and Pominville. Vanek went at Lucic but got shoved away like he was a child. Sekera reached like he was trying to grab Lucic's jersey, but got jabbed in the chest, couldn't reach the Bruin because his arms were too short, then gave up. Pominville, having seen the other 2 guys engage Lucic, peeled off and locked with Krejci, but he was clearly trying to get to Miller and see if he was okay. He's the only guy on the ice really thinking about the fallen goalie. Here came Tyler Myers as slowly as possible into the fray, so by the time he latched onto Lucic, the officials were already between them. Then there was Gaustad, who was coming the farthest distance, trying desperately to get to Lucic, but he couldn't just go over Miller, and so he got intercepted by Nathan Horton. Or he chose to grab Horton because it was too late, / he didn't want to get into Lucic. Either way, Horton kept Gaustad at bay, and Lucic smirked to the penalty box past Miller's indignation. The camera cut to Patrick Galetta, the Sabres' true tough guy, after the scrum with his legs slung over the boards, ready to hit the ice. Horton shoved him, but that was about it. Now, as you may remember, when Chris Neil blew up Chris Drury with a dirty hit, Lindy Ruff and his Sabres started an all-out war with the Senators, actively running after players to fight them. Even Marty Biron fought. Well, okay. The Sabres weren't going to have that style of response here because they have a power play, and Miller seems to be okay still. But Lindy wasn't going to take this lying down. Yet there was Lucic on his next shift, parked in front of Miller, and nobody cared. Except Miller, of course. Later in that same period, Ville Leino tied up Tyler Seguin, and the Bruin barreled into Miller. At the very least, the optics were not great for either player. Leino found himself in a prison of sorts. Aside from the Bruins scoring 3 goals, nothing happened in the second. No response from the Sabres. Enroth replaced the clearly not 100% Miller for the third and got lit up some more. Paul Gaustad spoke sternly to Lucic. I'm not sure if that did much. Lucic didn't really play much in the third, but Pat Kaleta did hit Sean Thornton. Woo! No response in defense of Miller. It was time for discourse. Miller was obviously furious about the hit.
I'm not going to really get into that. I just stuck around because I just want to say that piece of shit I think Lucic is 50 pounds on me and runs me like that. It's unbelievable.
Gaustad was disappointed in himself.
You were clearly blunt last night about your role in the Lucic situation. You said you were embarrassed. Lindy said you were on the ice. Was he particularly upset with you that you didn't take more of an action, do you think?
I was pretty blunt about how I felt about myself. It wasn't directed towards other teammates. It was more myself. I thought in reaction to that type, I hoped I could have done more there.
Lucic had a hearing with Brendan Shanahan, the NHL's VP and the man in charge of player discipline. Miller had whiplash and a concussion. No suspension or fine came for Lucic, but according to Boston GM Peter Chiarelli in an ESPN article following the hearing, my guess is that if you see it again, there will be a suspension. In the same piece, Bruins coach Claude Julien maintained that he didn't believe the hit was intentional. I know for a fact that if Milan had intended on hitting Miller, he would have never got up, he added. We all know how hard he hits, and that speaks for itself. Though disappointed that there wasn't any supplemental discipline, the Sabres, namely Pominville and Miller, insisted that the team wasn't lingering on the hit. Both had thoughtful quotes in the ESPN article, with Miller saying he knew that his team had his back and didn't want them to stoop to Lucic's level, and Pominville saying they dealt with it as players and as a team. The game after the hit, a Sabres win against the Canadiens, there was Eric Cole barreling over Enroth. Once again, the response was muted, but Cole wasn't the pugilist Lucic was, so it's reasonable to consider this an accident, though a strangely timed one. Also in that Habs game, Tyler Myers was a healthy scratch. Now I have no evidence for this. It's just pure conjecture. But reading between the lines on Pominville's statement, I think Myers was benched for his lack of individual response to the Lucic hit. Normally, if you're going to scratch a guy, you'd lower his ice time a bit first. But that wasn't the case for Myers. Listen, Myers wasn't playing well at the time, and it could have just been rough trying to reset a young player. But I don't think Myers coasting toward Lucic helped his case. Externally, there was a lot of criticism leveled toward the Sabres, with the dialogue being that they were soft.
Were you surprised that no one else would have retaliated after?
A little bit. Yeah.
Now, I've done a few of these videos now, and a trend is teams furiously and hopelessly chasing revenge, and often costing themselves. The Sabres, in contrast, were just going to move on. Their captain wasn't a fighter, but he was a leader that they respected. Buffalo wasn't just going to mindlessly chase revenge. They talked about it as a team. It was done. The Sabres treaded water with Enroth in net, and they met the Bruins again just over a week later. The Sabres, as the home team, had the last change, so the first time Lucic hit the ice, Gaustad was out there. The two fought, Gaustad clearly lost, but that was it. This whole issue was dealt with. Later in the game, Brad Marchand ran the diminutive wonder Nathan Gerbe, and bang, there was Gaustad. There was Robin Regeer fighting Zdeno Chara. Drew Stafford even dared to bump Tim Thomas. The Sabres didn't win the game, but they proved a point. They weren't a vicious team like the Bruins, but they were willing to stand up for themselves when it came down to it. Then the Sabres burst into flames. After that loss to Boston, Buffalo went 7-16-4 over their next 27 games. Enroth's magic ran out. He accounted for just one of those 7 wins. But the problem was, the returning Miller was worse. .889 save percentage during that stretch in the sewer. In fact, on Miller's first night back from injury, he got blown up again, this time by Jordan Tutu. Finally, the response was different, with every Sabre, including Miller, leaping onto the pile to pound on the assailant. It was one of the Sabres' few wins during their trip down the drain, so it seemed for a second like the ship was righted.
What a move, Zach Cassian!
More importantly, the response from the league was different. Tutu got a major and was thrown out of the game, then earned a 2-game suspension for his hit.
Yeah, and what happened in the game is a joke. It's a joke. All it does is just prove the fact, right, that when I said it was open season, it appears it is open season. You get a guy that comes off a concussion, you got Jordan Tutu.
Lucic was to be the last player to get away with such a blatant goalie hit. The Tutu suspension may have been a breath of fresh air off the ice for Buffalo, but it did nothing to help them on it. The Sabres did catch fire for just a minute, long enough to crush the Bruins, and this time Patrick Kaleta got beaten up. Hooray! Remember, guys, this was supposed to be over. After their short winning streak, the Sabres returned to the dumpster and sold at the deadline. Namely, they sold off Paul Gaustad. Now, was this some culture-based decision dating back to Gaustad's cardinal sin of losing a fight to a bigger guy than him? No. Gaustad was an expiring free agent, and Nashville gave Buffalo a first-round pick for him. Gaustad had 7 goals. The man's career high was 12. You take the first for him and a fourth and drive away, tires screeching. Nashville GM David Poile saw that career faceoff percentage in the mid-50s and couldn't help himself. I wonder what that 4th-round pick turned into. Oh, come on.
Across, wide open. Oh, what a save on Kane! Oh, Saros, what a stop!
The Sabres, after the trade deadline, were actually quite good, mostly thanks to Miller being a .930 goalie again, though they still missed the playoffs. They were somewhat revitalized by a youth player swap that brought in Cody Hodgson for Zach Cassian and swapped some depth D-men. The Sabres, truthfully, had a lot of good young guys. The Tylers of contrasting size, Ennis and Myers, Hodgson, Luke Adam looked good, Marcus Foligno, Braden McNabb. The problem was, the veteran depth on this team was truly horrible, overpaid, or sometimes both. This team was cruising for a rebuild. But with some good moves in the 2012 offseason, they could maybe stretch it for another year. Then they traded Derek Roy for Steve Ott and an AHL defenseman in Adam Party. Then they signed John Scott. Not the good moves that one would hope for. It was clear that management wasn't over the Lucic incident, despite the players being ready to move on. Maybe management saw that as a problem. The Sabres, predictably, marched into the cellar the next season, never to return. Now, there's a school of thought that Milan Lucic ended the Sabres.
You ruined that. You ruined their entire season that year. Ruined it.
You ruined it.
Still trying to recover.
They got Eichel because of it. What are you talking about?
But the team was already set to break down by the time Miller got run over. They had Ehrhoff signed. They had Leno signed. They had given Vanek his fortune. Drew Stafford had his big contract. Like I said, they'd have needed all the right moves in the offseason for this team to be competitive for one more season. Lucic didn't make Tyler Myers develop in reverse, nor did he have anything to do with the Jack Eichel saga. Did Lucic ruin their franchise? No, not really, but for many Sabres fans, he's emblematic of everything that did. The squandering of Miller, the mindless pursuit of toughness, and even the garbage depth. Milan Lucic was the embodiment of the pain of being a Sabres fan over the last decade. He didn't break the team, but he might as well have.
Everyone in the city sees him as a big, tough, solid player. I respected him for how hard he played. That was gutless. Gutless. Piece of shit.